Listen to me very carefully. This is for you. Right now, if there's a Lincoln Wheat Penny anywhere near you, and the date ends in a 3, do not spend it. I'm serious. People throw these old copper pennies into tip jars, coin jars, vending machines, and loose pocket change every single day. And that's exactly how silent fortunes disappear. Because the truth is, most Lincoln Wheat Pennies do not look rare. That's the trap. They're small, they're old, and they pass through people's hands every single day without anyone realizing what they might actually be worth. But behind closed doors, collectors are quietly and aggressively searching for certain wheat pennies. And when the right one shows up, the prices can be absolutely shocking. Real auction numbers, real collector demand, real money. The kind of prices that make no sense, unless you know the hidden secret nobody talks about. And that's exactly why these pennies are so easy to miss. Because the less people know, the easier they are to spend by mistake. So stop what you're doing and check your pocket change right now. Because in this video, it only gets rarer, scarier, and more valuable as we go. Stay with me until the very end. This is SF Coins USA, and these coins might just change everything. Coin number 1. You have a 1940 Lincoln Wheat Penny hiding in an old jar, stuck in a drawer, mixed into a coin roll, sitting in your grandfather's collection, or buried in a dusty box nobody has touched in years. Do not ignore it too quickly, because this is exactly how valuable coins disappear. They don't always arrive shining in velvet boxes. They don't always look rich. In fact, some of the most exciting coin discoveries in America started with one tiny copper cent that looked old, dirty, ordinary, and completely harmless. And today, we are diving deep into one of the most talked about old pennies still found by collectors, roll hunters, and treasure seekers all across the United States, the 1940 Lincoln Wheat Penny. Now, before you think this is just another old penny, I want you to understand something very important. Old does not automatically mean valuable, but sometimes old combined with rarity, condition, mint quality, strike sharpness, original red color, proof surfaces, or minting mistakes can turn an everyday-looking coin into a piece of history worth real money. And that is exactly why so many people are now paying attention to wheat pennies again. Because what most people see as pocket change, collectors often see as hidden opportunity. The 1940 Lincoln Wheat Penny comes from one of the most beloved coin series in American history. This coin belongs to the Lincoln Wheat Cent family, the classic 1-cent coins that were minted from 1909 to 1958. These are the coins with Abraham Lincoln on the front and 2 wheat ears on the back. To millions of Americans, this design is not just currency, it is nostalgia. It is memory. It is history pressed into metal. These pennies pass through the hands of soldiers, factory workers, shopkeepers, school children, and families who lived through war, poverty, hope, and rebuilding. Every one of these little copper coins carries a silent story. And the 1940 issue is especially interesting because it was made at a moment when America stood at the edge of massive change. The world was already at war in Europe, and although the United States had not yet officially entered World War II, tension was growing. Factories were expanding. Industry was shifting. The country was moving toward one of the most dramatic eras in modern history. So when you hold a 1940 wheat penny, you are not just holding a cent. You are holding a survivor from a tense and historic year in the American timeline. The first thing you need to know about your 1940 penny is this. If there is no mint mark under the date, that means it was made in Philadelphia. That is the version most people find. Philadelphia struck an enormous number of them, more than 586 million. That huge mintage is one reason why the average war example is usually not worth a fortune. Most circulated 1940 no-mint mark pennies trade for very modest amounts. In heavily worn condition, many are worth only a few cents above face value. In better circulated condition, they may sell for a bit more. And in lower, uncirculated grades, they can still remain relatively affordable. That truth surprises a lot of people because many expect every old wheat penny to be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. That's not how coin collecting works. The money is in the details. And those details can change everything. When collectors judge a coin, they're not just asking, how old is it? They are asking, how well did it survive? That is where condition becomes the king of value. A 1940 wheat penny that spent decades rubbing against other coins in pockets, cash drawers, vending machines, and jars will usually show wear. Lincoln's cheek may be flat. The hair above the ear may be weak. The wheat lines on the reverse may be worn down. The color may have turned deep brown. None of that is bad. It just means the coin lived a real life. But from a market standpoint, heavy wear usually keeps the value low. Now here is where things start getting exciting. If your 1940 penny looks unusually sharp, unusually clean, or unusually bright, your chances improve immediately. A coin that still has strong details, full wheat lines, and very little friction can move into much more collectible territory. And if your coin is truly uncirculated, meaning it never saw everyday pocket use, then the conversation changes fast. Uncirculated wheat cents are prized because so many of them were used, spent, damaged, or lost over the years. Finding one that escaped that fate is always interesting. But even among uncirculated coins, there are levels. Some uncirculated 1940 pennies are just decent. Others are stunning. And in coin collecting, stunning can mean money. Collectors especially chase coins with original red color. This is one of the most important things you need to understand if you are serious about wheat penny value. Copper changes color over time. A freshly struck 1940 penny would have had a rich orange-red copper glow. But over the decades, exposure to air, moisture, oils, and handling causes copper to darken. That is why so many old pennies now look brown. The market usually separates these into three broad color categories: brown, red-brown, and red. Brown coins are the most common among old cents. Red-brown coins still show some original mint color. But true red coins, especially from 1940 and especially in high mint state grades, are where collector demand gets stronger. Why? Because true red examples that remain clean, untouched, and beautifully preserved after so many decades are much harder to find than people think. And once a coin is both old and visually elite, the value can jump hard. That is why some 1940 pennies that look almost identical to the average person can have wildly different prices. One coin might be worth less than $1, while another certified high-grade red example might be worth hundreds or even thousands. To a non-collector, that sounds insane. To a serious numismatist, it makes perfect sense. Coins are not just metal. They are condition-sensitive historical objects, and tiny differences can completely change their market level. Now let's talk about something that drives views, excitement, and real treasure hunts: rare errors and unusual varieties. Because when people hear about old pennies selling for huge money, they're usually not talking about a normal circulated coin. They're talking about something different, something that slipped past the mint, something imperfect, something strange. And collectors love strange. A 1940 penny with a minting error can instantly become more interesting than a normal one. Maybe the strike is off-center. Maybe the lettering is doubled. Maybe there's a repunched mint mark on a branch mint coin, like a Denver or San Francisco piece. Maybe there's a die crack, a cud, a clipped planchet, or a lamination issue in the copper. These are the kinds of things collectors look for under magnification, and most people miss them completely. This is exactly why old pennies get thrown away, spent, or sold cheaply every day. People see dirt. Collectors see possibility. Take doubling, for example. Next up, if you have a 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny hiding somewhere in your home right now, I need you to stop for a second and pay very close attention. Because what looks like a dirty old 1-cent copper coin to most people could actually be a forgotten piece of American history with collector value far beyond what anyone in your family ever imagined. And the reason so many valuable coins get lost, ignored, spent, or thrown away is very simple. They never look dangerous. They never look powerful. They never look like money. They look small, old, ordinary, worn out, and completely harmless. And that is exactly how treasure disappears in silence. Today, we are talking about one of the most fascinating old pennies in the Lincoln Wheat series, the 1951 Wheat Penny, a coin that millions of people have seen, but almost nobody truly understands. Because hidden behind this little copper cent is a story of post-war America, rising industry, family survival, forgotten savings, coin roll hunting, collector obsession, and one of the biggest truths in the coin world. The rarest treasures are often the ones nobody takes seriously. So if you have ever opened an old coin jar, checked a dusty drawer, searched through inherited change, looked inside a cigar box from your grandparents, or found a pile of old pennies in a closet and thought, these are probably worthless, then this video is exactly for you. Because one of the biggest mistakes people make with old US coins is assuming that just because a coin is common in appearance, it must be common in value. And with the 1951 VDB Lincoln Wheat Penny, that assumption can be very expensive. Now let's start with the first thing you need to know. The D mint mark on your 1951 penny means it was struck at the Denver Mint. That little letter under the date may seem tiny, but in the world of coin collecting, tiny details create giant differences. A lot of people never even notice mint marks. They just see the date, maybe the face, maybe the wheat ears on the back, and then move on. But collectors don't move on. Collectors slow down. They look closer. Because sometimes the entire value of a coin changes because of one small letter. In the 1951, D belongs to one of the most loved and collected coin families in all of American numismatics, the Lincoln Wheat Penny series, which ran from 1909 to 1958. These are the classic 1-cent coins with Abraham Lincoln on the front and 2 wheat ears on the reverse. To millions of Americans, these coins are more than money. They are memory. They are history. They are pocket-sized survivors from a completely different America. And when you hold one, especially one from the early 1950s, you are holding something that lived through a country still rebuilding its identity after war, sacrifice, and transformation. The year 1951 was not just another random date. America was in the middle of a huge cultural and economic shift. The country had already passed through World War II, but its effects were still everywhere. Families were rebuilding. Industry was expanding. The American dream was growing. Cars were rolling. Neighborhoods were expanding. Television culture was rising. And people were working hard to build stable lives after years of global uncertainty. And during that time, pennies still mattered. 1 cent was not nothing. 1 cent still had meaning. It still bought things. It still completed purchases. It still moved from hand to hand in grocery stores, school lunches, diners, bus fares, newspaper stands, and family kitchens. That means your 1951 VDB Wheat Penny is not just a coin. It is a witness. It passed through real American life. It may have been held by a child saving coins in a piggy bank. It may have sat in a soldier's pocket. It may have crossed a lunch counter, a gas station, a tobacco shop, or a local corner store. It may have been dropped under a couch in the 1950s and forgotten for decades. And now, after all these years, it may be sitting in your hand, waiting for someone to finally realize that it deserves a second look. Now here is where things get interesting. Most people hear old wheat penny and immediately think they are rich. That is where fantasy begins. But real coin knowledge begins with honesty. And the honest truth is this. Most 1951 VDB Wheat pennies are not worth a fortune in ordinary condition. If your coin is heavily worn, dark brown, scratched, cleaned, or damaged, it may only be worth a modest amount over face value. That disappoints some people, but that's how real collecting works. Age alone does not create greatness. What creates greatness is survival. What creates value is condition. What creates excitement is rarity within the date. And what creates serious money is when all of those things come together in one coin. That is exactly why some 1951 VDB pennies sell for almost nothing, while others get serious attention from collectors, dealers, and high-end buyers. The difference is not the year alone. The difference is how well the coin survived the last 7 decades. Think about what most pennies go through in life. They get dropped, stepped on, scraped, counted, stacked, tossed into drawers, jammed into machines, rubbed against other coins, carried in sweaty pockets, stored in damp containers, and forgotten in places where no coin should ever be left. That kind of life destroys quality. It wears away details. It dulls the color. It damages the surfaces. It erases the sharpness that collectors want. So when a coin from 1951 somehow escapes all of that abuse and survives in beautiful condition, it becomes far more special than people realize. This is where the real collector language begins, and this is the part that separates regular old pennies from truly desirable ones. When collectors examine a 1951 VDB Wheat Penny, they are looking for a combination of things: sharp strike, clean surfaces, original luster, strong detail, untouched color, and overall eye appeal. A coin that still looks crisp and alive after all these years is instantly more important than a coin that looks tired and worn. And in the copper coin world, one of the biggest value factors of all is color. This is one of the most important secrets in Lincoln cent collecting. Copper changes over time. A freshly minted 1951 VDB Wheat Penny would have originally come out with a bright, glowing orange-red copper color. It would have looked alive, rich, fiery, fresh from the press. But copper is sensitive. It reacts to air, moisture, handling, oils, and time. That means many old wheat pennies slowly darken as the years pass. Some become red-brown. Others become fully brown. That is why most old wheat pennies no longer look the way they looked when they were born. And here's the big collector truth. The closer a coin remains to its original mint red color, the more exciting it can become. That means if your 1951 VDB Wheat Penny still has strong original red brilliance, your coin may already be in a more desirable category than the average example. Collectors often separate copper cents into three major appearance groups: brown, red-brown, and red. Next up, if you have a 1957 Lincoln Wheat Penny with no mint mark hiding somewhere in your house right now, I need you to slow down and listen carefully, because what looks like a simple old copper penny could actually be one of those forgotten coins that people throw away, spend too quickly, or ignore for years before realizing it may have had far more value than anyone ever expected. And the reason this happens so often is because the most interesting coins in America rarely look dramatic at first. They do not flash like treasure. They do not scream wealth. They do not come in gold boxes or museum displays. Most of the time, they look dusty, worn, dark, ordinary, and completely harmless. And that is exactly how hidden coin fortunes vanish every single day. Today, we are talking about one of the most famous and most searched old pennies in the United States, the 1957 Lincoln Wheat Penny with no mint mark, a coin that has lived quietly in pocket change, coin jars, estate boxes, dresser drawers, and forgotten family collections for decades. And even though millions of people have handled this date without a second thought, serious collectors know that some old wheat pennies deserve a much closer look. Because in the coin world, value does not come from size. It does not come from face value. And it definitely does not come from what the coin looks like to someone who does not understand what they are holding. Value comes from history, condition, originality, rarity, eye appeal, and sometimes from one tiny detail that almost everybody else misses. That is exactly what makes the 1957 no mint mark wheat penny such an exciting coin to talk about. Because to the average person, it is just another old cent. But to collectors, it is part of one of the most beloved coin series ever made in the history of the United States. This coin belongs to the legendary Lincoln Wheat Penny series, first introduced in 1909 and produced until 1958. It features Abraham Lincoln on the front and the classic two wheat stalks on the back, a design so iconic that it has become one of the most recognizable coin images in American history. For generations, these pennies were more than money. They were everyday life. They bought candy, milk, newspapers, school snacks, and simple household items. They passed through the hands of children, workers, soldiers, parents, and dreamers. They were spent, saved, lost, and rediscovered. And now, decades later, they continue to fascinate people because some of them still hide real collector value in plain sight. Now let's begin with the first thing you need to understand about the 1957 no mint mark penny. If there is no mint mark under the date, that means the coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. A lot of people never notice mint marks, but in coin collecting, those tiny letters can completely change the identity of a coin. That small blank space under the date tells you something important. This coin came from the original U.S. Mint location in Philadelphia, one of the most historic minting centers in American coinage. And while Philadelphia struck enormous numbers of Lincoln cents over the years, that does not mean every example is worthless. In fact, this is where many people get fooled. They hear that a coin was common, and they assume there is no money in it. But in the coin world, common date does not always mean common value. Because what really separates a normal coin from a valuable one is not just the date alone. It is how the coin survived. That is the secret. That is the truth. And that is where the 1957 no mint mark wheat penny starts to become much more interesting than most people realize. Think about what an ordinary penny goes through in life. It gets dropped on concrete, rubbed against keys, scraped in pockets, tossed into jars, stacked in cash drawers, jammed into machines, stepped on, stored in heat, exposed to moisture, and handled by hundreds of people over the years. That kind of life is brutal for a coin. It wears away details. It dulls the surfaces. It changes the color. It damages the originality. It slowly erases the sharpness that collectors want. So when an old coin from 1957 somehow survives with strong detail, clean surfaces, and original beauty, it becomes instantly more important than the average example. And this is exactly why some 1957 pennies are worth very little, while others become highly collectible and sometimes surprisingly valuable. Because in coins, survival is power. Now let's talk about one of the biggest collector secrets when it comes to old copper pennies: color. This is one of the most important things you can ever learn if you are serious about Lincoln Wheat Penny value. When a penny is first struck, it comes out of the mint with a bright, rich, glowing red copper color. It looks alive, fresh, sharp, full of fire. But copper is one of the most sensitive metals used in U.S. coinage. It reacts over time to air, oils, moisture, and environment. That means as the years pass, many copper coins begin to darken. Some turn into a warm red-brown, and others become fully brown. That is why so many old wheat pennies look dark or dirty today. But here's the part that matters for value. Collectors often pay much more for coins that still retain strong, original red color. That means if your 1957 no mint mark wheat penny still has that bright red copper look, especially if it also has very little wear, then you may be looking at a much more desirable coin than the average brown circulated example. In the coin market, copper cents are often separated into three basic visual groups: brown, red-brown, and red. Brown coins are the most common. Red-brown coins are more appealing. But true red examples, especially those that survived in uncirculated condition, are often the ones collectors chase the hardest. And this is why two coins with the exact same date can have completely different prices. One may be worth almost nothing. Another may be worth a few dollars. Another may be worth much more. And the best-looking ones can become the kind of coins that make people stop and stare. That is how coin collecting works. It is a world where tiny differences create giant surprises. Now let's talk about why the 1957 wheat penny is such a famous date in the first place. This year sits very late in the wheat penny series, just before the design changed forever. Only 1 year later, in 1958, the wheat reverse would disappear for good, and in 1959, the Lincoln Memorial reverse would replace it. That means the 1957 issue belongs to the final chapter of one of the most loved coin designs in American history. And whenever a coin comes from the ending years of a classic series, collectors tend to pay attention. There is something special about a coin that comes from the closing era of a design people grew up with, saved, and remembered. The 1957 no mint mark wheat penny is also famous because it comes from a time when America was changing fast. The 1950s were a powerful period in U.S. history. Families were building homes. Cars were everywhere. Television was growing.